Welcome to the Long Thread podcast about spinning, stitching, and weaving by hand. The podcast is presented by Long Thread Media, publishers of Spin-Off, Handwoven, Piecework, and Little Looms magazines. Find us online at longthreadmedia.com. Trinway Silks is where weavers, spinners, knitters, and stitchers find the silk they love. Select from the largest variety of silk spinning fibers, silk yarn, and silk threads and ribbons at trinwaysilks.com. You'll discover a rainbow of colors thoughtfully hand-dyed in Colorado. Love natural? Trinway's array of wild silks provide choices beyond white. If you love silk, you'll love Trinway Silks, where superior quality and customer service are guaranteed. Brown Sheep Company is a 4-generation family business bringing you high-quality wool and natural fiber yarns. We spin and dye U.S.-grown wool into hundreds of vibrant colors at our mill in western Nebraska. Our mill has something to offer for every craft, from our well-known knitting and crocheting yarns to wool roving for spinning and felting. We offer U.S.-made needlepoint yarn as well as yarn on cones for weaving projects. Learn more about our company and products at brownsheep.com. I'm your host, Long Thread Media co-founder Ann Marrow. Tamara White is the farmer and proprietress of Wing and a Prayer Farm, which offers breed-specific yarns from her beloved New England flock of sheep. Tammy, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, Anne. It's great to be here.
So this is the time of year when I love just vicariously looking at everything that you have going on. Can you tell me about Wing and a Prayer Farm?
Okay, sure. I'll try to keep it brief. This is a small fiber farm in Shaftesbury, Vermont, which is a southwestern portion of Vermont. And so it's in a tri-state region. Massachusetts and New York are like within a half hour or 15-minute drive from me. So it's a really great location. It's a very beautiful setting in that I've been here for almost 40 years. And when I first came upon this property, I was enchanted because it's tucked away. You have to drive through a few trees and then it opens up to the farm. And I felt like I'd found a little Eden when I discovered this property then. And I was much younger. I was a very young bride. And so people are often surprised at how long I've been here. And I decided that I guess I'd been living here, I don't know, maybe I was here almost 20 years and my kids were old enough to be like helpers. And they took it as one of their projects. We homeschooled, and they took it as one of their projects to learn about sheep and which sheep would be best suited to this farm if we started to have sheep, because we only had chickens in the past as far as animals went, or, the occasional bunny. And then they decided upon Shetlands. So I had 3 kids that were obviously old enough to read and research for about a year. Visited various Shetland farms and brought home our first Shetland sheep in 2000. And so the rest is sort of history. So it's 2025. We just had a crop of lambs that sort of run my life now. The kids are all adults and have careers and work. So it's me and the farm. When they did get old enough to start going away to school and having full-time jobs, that is when I decided to upsize instead of downsize. So before that was more or less a hobby farm with a flock of like a dozen sheep. Mm-hmm. And then it turned into more of a production farm, because by then I also had like a good number of years under my belt where I had been strictly taking care of the flocks and lambing and things like that, and not promoting their fiber as much because my flock was small for a considerable amount of time. So I was not getting enough to process into yarn, which is what I sell now, except for like once every couple of years. And then my flock started growing in a couple of ways. I was specifically trying to grow the flock by breeding more Shetlands. And then also because people would look me up and gift me their sheep because so like I have pretty soft heart, and they would be like, "Oh, you're a nice farmer." maybe you could take care of these sheep that we can't take care of anymore, which is a real thing. And so I took on a lot of rescues, which was how I started getting a lot of different breeds of sheep on the farm. So today the picture is quite a bit different from that sort of middle era. I have 105 sheep now, and I have other fiber animals as well. And I have a most recent acquisition of non-fiber animals, 2 calves that are
wow.
going to grow up to be cows in 2 years, brown Swiss. And they're kind of like I don't know, I just had a milestone birthday. So some people like go on cruises or whatnot, but I got myself 2 cows, 2 cows. They're just lovely. I'm really happy with them. So anyway, I'll talk more about them later, but so I went from a small hobby farm to a full-time fiber farm. And I don't think because I don't have 1,000 or more head of sheep or whatnot, that I'm not a production farm.
Mhm.
It is what I do full-time. It is how I pay my bills. So even though I only have 105 sheep, it is my full-time job to sell yarn and also to sell breed stock. I sell animals, and I teach workshops too.
I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that you developed the potential to have yarn by increasing the number of breeds you had. I usually think of that as being kind of a air quotes hand spinner's flock when you have a variety, but you have a breadth of different wool options within this little flock. How do you manage having a little of this and a little of that?
Well,
Yeah, yes.
it's not the easy way, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like retirement for me will be all Shetland sheep. It doesn't mean no sheep. It doesn't mean no shearing, it just means one breed. So when I do retire, maybe in 10 years or so, I would like to keep going until I drop. I really would. But I don't, being a production fiber farmer is an enormous amount of work, like physical and all other, like the administration and all of that. So I would like to be able to have a tiny bit of time when I am in my 70s. So the thing is, it's a matter of how you see fiber. I see wool as a natural fiber. And if we open our minds to like blending as a way of increasing the usage of wool as a fiber, instead of saying, oh no, you can only have this kind of fiber or this kind of fiber in a yarn, then it's like making beautiful dishes in your kitchen. It's more interesting to me. I have these Cormo sheep, and I will spin like 100% Cormo. It's a fine wool because it makes a beautiful particular type of yarn. But my favorite yarns are the blends of like some long wools, some fine wools, and then maybe another type of fiber, like to add in mohair or alpaca or something like that, to make a more interesting fiber that's either going to have more drape or additional luster. It's a little more complex. It's more suited to a particular use. So it is challenging, but to me, interesting, challenging. But beyond that, an important skill use that we should all have our minds and our hearts open to help increase breed diversity. So the bottom line to me is diversity and how important that is for our planet and how important it is to these breeds of sheep. I am so passionate about the animals, and that is what I care about above everything. And if we can't make room in our small farms or our hearts or in our world for a breed that's fiber quality is like, say, less desirous because it's not commercially used, then we're going to lose that breed. And that's only going to hurt the species overall. So I feel like it's up to us, like as a small producer, to support diversity. So that is my guiding line. So if you have a long wool and it's sort of coarse, you could live here too. I'm just going to figure out something different to do with your fiber, you know? Or if you're a little Shetland and you've got that dual coat, I don't care if you're not a fine fleece Shetland, you can live here too. I'll find use for your beautiful fiber. Like all fiber are welcome here.
Yeah.
And I mean it.
Yeah. And now a word from our sponsors. The Michigan Fiber Festival, Michigan's largest sheep and wool festival, is a vibrant world of fiber arts. Discover 5 days of classes with nationally recognized teachers in spinning, weaving, lace making, dyeing, felting, and rug hooking. Enjoy 3 days of shopping, delight in shearing and fiber arts demonstrations, and enjoy a truly immersive experience. Join us in August at the picturesque Allegan County Fairgrounds. You can even camp on site. Find more details at michiganfiberfestival.info. And now back to the show. Well, and one of the ways that you do that is through partnerships. I know that you sometimes work with other farms through events, but also in building your own yarn.
Yeah, I do love a collab, and I love the idea of it. I have I'm trying to think. And that's also like a good and a bad business move on my part too. Something like I would recommend but not recommend is like I have so many different types of yarns because of having had so many different types of sheep that it's difficult to like sustain that many different types. But because I am a small business, I can work with most of my customers one-on-one. So I can like hold your hand and walk you through what I think is going to really suit the project you're working on, or if you are thinking about embarking on a project. Because I know my sheep and I know my yarns so intimately, like I can help you there. You're not on your own. I'm trying to think of like I have a few sort of worsted and Aran weights that are either pure, like 100% Clun Forest, or are a blend of Clun Forest, which is a sort of a medium grade fiber. I love using it. It's like a workhorse fiber. And the mills that I've been using to spin it have been getting the most out of it as well. So, but I also have it as part of a blend in a yarn so the 100% Clun Forest is Teddy Bear's Picnic, and that's the yarn. And okay, this is not something you asked me about, but like I name my yarns all kinds of funny names because it's like the Cluns, when the Clun Forest sheep, they don't look like teddy bears at all, but I think they're beautiful sheep. They have dark, dark faces, and they have sort of a fawn colored fleece and dark legs. They're a little bit stouter than, say, a Shetland sheep, but they have some similar properties. But they are a sheep that's from the Clun Forest region in the UK. And so I think about if you go down to the woods today, the Teddy Bear's Picnic sort of poetry where I don't know when I think about the Clun Forest. And so I've never been there. So I called their yarn Teddy Bear's Picnic. But then they have another yarn, this blend that I was talking about a few minutes ago, that's called the Happiest Yarn. And that's a blend. And that's the Clun, and it's my Shetland, and it's this and that. And my friend Ellen and I collaborated together to start that yarn, the Happiest Yarn. And I remember when we named that yarn, and she and I are of similar energy. So we've had some exciting road trips together all around all sheep related and fiber related. And I remember we were brainstorming the name, and we were like, well, we were so excited. We just wanted to call it the Happiest Yarn because it made us so happy. And so, but there's a blend, and you wouldn't think that putting Clun Forest fiber with these other fibers would make such a nice yarn, but it's a yarn that's like, I've been making it now since 2012. So 13 years I've been making that yarn. It's been a good yarn for that long. And so collaborating amongst my Phlox fiber, collaborating amongst friends, collaborating with mills. I can talk a little bit about all these different fleeces that I have and what I do to get the best yarns that I can. And that is like finding a mill that is suited to spinning. So recently I had a beautiful Teeswater blend created. So I have Teeswater sheep, whom I love. They have the most lustrous fleeces. As animals on the farm, They are big. They are like 276. That's how much they weigh. The girls, I'm getting a ram next week, actually, another ram, but he'll be that big or bigger. They're big girls. And when I say big girls, I mean, they're not like, they just have a ton of muscle. They're very strong and they don't pay attention to where they are. So they're always moving me around. But they're lovely. Their temperament is lovely. They just really have a lot to say. And so they produce a lot of fiber. I had been saving for a couple of years because I wanted to have as close to 100% Teeswater of a yarn line as I could, because the Teeswater sheep on the Livestock Conservancy are in the critical category. And so I want to try to get Teeswater out there as much as possible, be a responsible livestock owner and Livestock Conservancy member. And so that's why I continue to breed the Teeswaters. They're probably, like I just said, how big they are. So they're big consumers and they push me around out there. They're not because they're unkind, but because they're big and pushy. And so, there are a lot of reasons for me to not raise them. Mm-hmm. But I believe it's more important to support this breed that's on the critical list and to breed them. So the yarn came back. The mill that spun it is a small mill in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont called Kingdom Fleece and Fiber. And they are just getting their feet wet in the milling. They've been creating carded roving and bats for quite a few years, but they just got the equipment to spin with worsted mill machinery in the last year. And so they didn't try to spin it right away because Teeswater fiber is slippery. And they knew that it would be a challenge. We knew it would be a challenge and they wanted to build their confidence before they attacked it. And so when they were ready to spin it, we talked about what we would blend with it because 100% Teeswater wasn't going to be able to be spun so well on account of its slipperiness. So I helped our shearer on shearing day at their farm and grabbed some fleeces in exchange. We bartered because I helped them with the skirting end of things on their farm all day, which I would have done for nothing just because I know how important it is to have extra help. Like you've been here on shearing day and there are a lot of jobs. And so I was like, hey, let me help you if you want. And so I did go home with some fleeces in exchange, some border Leicester and fin fleeces. So we used those fleeces to blend in with my Teeswater when it was time. And it made the most beautiful DK yarn that came back. We were originally going to do a 3-strand and maybe a fingering, but no, that was a bad fit. So then we ended up doing a two-ply DK. And it's a beautiful yarn. It's like sort of a very soft fawn gray color because of the blend. And it has wonderful drape. It's so shiny without anything. It's just out there shining in the sun because I've been washing it and mordanting it because I'm about to dye it soon. So, and I did dye some of it and it takes the dye so well. So I'm really pleased with that. And that was a process. It took us took us a long time to get to that yarn. But in the end, I'm really thrilled with it. And it's in my Thelma and Louise line, which is my 2-ply DK that I have. And so, which is a long wool, sort of a fine wool blend with sometimes added mohair. But in this case, there's no need. It has this halo, like it's an incredible halo.
That's quite a risk, though, to this fiber that you've been, especially when you only have a couple of a particular breed. And yes, you're combining them, but you have a whole year's worth. And it must be kind of exciting, maybe a little nerve-wracking to send something off for the first time to see what it wants to become.
It is, because that was I felt like it was a very special fiber that I wanted to do something special with. I didn't want to risk sending it anywhere. I knew that it was going to be risky because this mill is just learning the ropes, but the equipment that they're using is the equipment from one of my favorite mills, and he went out of business and he sold some of that equipment to this mill, and he kind of, worked with them closely. I really trusted him. I trusted that previous relationship. And then I trusted this person who, is running this mill now. So, And she didn't want to fail. She was as invested in it as I was. Like, she wanted it to be good. So we did do a small batch at first and then changed it up, and said, no, I think it should be this instead. And we're real pleased with the result. And that's happened through the years. I'm not necessarily making the same yarns with the same mills I started out with, because sometimes things change on both ends. And I have to go with my gut when I'm getting yarn made. When I would say when I'm making yarn, but I'm personally not the mill, right? So when I'm having yarn made, I'll go with quite a few factors to end up with it being where it's at. A lot of it, I would say, really relies on not just having good fiber going in, but on the relationship with the people that you're working with, to make sure that you're communicating well, make sure that you respect each other, and that, because people are busy all around, and especially mill owners and mill workers. Like, I've never met busier people, I think, than farmers, than people who run a mill, the small mills in the Northeast and beyond. I work with another mill in Michigan, and I love working with them. And sadly, like many mills, there's turnover because people get older and they need to retire, whatnot. But they're working with me to try to help me, so I'm not going to feel the deficit of when they leave, because I'm like, no, who's going to spin my core mill? Because I love what they do so much, but I understand they deserve to retire. So it's very risky. There have been a couple times in my career of making yarn, which is about 20 years of making yarn, because those first 5 years, I only had a few Shetlands. So I was just saving up fleeces for a few years. And then the run has come back, and it's been something that I wasn't proud of, but I think that mostly does not happen. It has happened a couple times, but no, I'm not mad about it. It's things happen all the time in the world, and there's nothing to get mad about. Like when you're making yarn and you're raising sheep, I get mad about stuff that's not related to what I do, because yeah. But I think part of it is, and you haven't asked about this, but I'm just rolling into it, is that my primary focus almost every day of the year is the weather. And as a farmer, I'm looking at the weather all of the time, because that is how I create my chore list, my work list, my project list. I look at where the sun is and when it's going to rain and all that, because I get fiber back and I'm processing it here 100% to the end product, because I dye it all here and it's naturally dyed. So I'm working in the garden and I'm working with the flocks. And next week, I have a shearer coming out for probably 4 hours, because there are some of my sheep, my Valais Blacknose sheep, which are the newest breed to the farm, which grow so much fiber that we've started to shear them midsummer as well. So they're getting shorn 3 times a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have many different groups of sheep, because I have the lambs, and right now they're still with their moms because they're still nursing. So the lambs and the mams. And then I have Gen Pop, which is the older non-breeding group. And then I have the boy band, which is my ram group. I had a yearling hogget group, but they are all integrated in with the Gen Pop group now. So I have to think now, I'm looking at the weather now for next Thursday to see, it's supposed to be rainy off and on quite a bit. I have to figure out how I'm going to get these guys under cover in advance so that their fleeces will be dry. So they'll be dry when they get shorn. So that's going on in my head. But yeah, at the same time, I'm okay, but they all will need cover, but they can't all be together, because I've got, lambs, they have a different diet. And so they and their moms have to be somewhere separate from Gen Pop. Gen Pop has to be separate from the rams, because I don't want indiscriminate breeding. When I bring them all in, I have to figure this out. And then how many are there going to be all together when I bring them all in? So I'm thinking about the weather for that. I'm thinking about the weather for my dyeing schedule. I really blew it because I didn't realize we were going to get a downpour this morning. I mean, a downpour, and I couldn't move everything fast enough. So all this wool that I've been washing locks for about 2 weeks now, all the fiber that I will be using for upcoming workshops. And it's all on tables in my backyard.
Oh.
And it was just almost dry. Everything is soaked. So an extra rinse. But we have this type of weather that it's not going to dry for a few days. It's just too humid. So I'm pretty bummed about that I missed that. As much as I weather hawk, I missed that. And then what I was going to say is, like, that's how I run my every single day, is like looking at the weather and what projects are going on around me, what projects are forecasted ahead of me, thinking about like events that will be in August, events that'll be in September, October. And there's no way I can know what's going to go on in the middle of October, but I'm trying to plan an event that's going to be taking place here then.
Mm-hmm.
And what should I be doing now so that people can park, or people can shop, because I'll set up sort of a marketplace here on the farm and things of that sort. And so all in a way of saying that my boss is Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And when your boss is Mother Nature, almost everything around that is small, is just nothing. And so I respect the weather. Pray to the weather gods. I mean, I don't want to sound wackadoo, even though I kind of am. But I feel like when the weather is in charge, other things don't matter as much. So that's how I feel like when I approach all the collaborations that I get into, is like, this is fun. This is what we're doing here together, making yarn or putting on an event or coming together in the name of education, or whatever the things are that we do together. That's like the fun stuff, because there's so many things within our control, right, if we just behave. Anyway, I'm getting real philosophical and weird, so you better pull me back in.
Well, I was just going to say, speaking of looking ahead in events, I've seen that you have people come to the farm and learn all kinds of things, especially natural dyeing, but all kinds of different techniques. And so you are, inviting people into this world. I guess one of my questions is, given that you are tucked away in this kind of a glen, what is it like for people to come and visit you? Do they understand what's going on? Like, how do you manage the weather and also all the people who want to be natural dyeing?
Well, that's a good question. I think that I get really focused when people come to the farm, that they're going to go home taking away some valuable lesson about the natural world and about natural fiber. I really believe in the power of each of us being able to make a difference in the world. So it becomes sort of a mission for me that everybody would go home with like inspiration to maybe like fix their lifestyle such that they are more conservative about natural resources or have more knowledge about fiber animals. People are always amazed at how much there is to learn about sheep, because they didn't know that like so many things. And so when I'm thinking about that, I'm not thinking too much about the experience that they're having physically. Like, yeah, I want to make sure everybody's comfortable. So like, I always know, for example, I have a bunch of natural dye workshops coming up this summer, all kinds of different workshops actually. And I don't have a workshop space per se, but I know that the barn aisleway is safe from rain and it's lit. I have light. There's electricity if we need it. It means moving and schlepping, right? It means like setting up every weekend, potentially in a new space, if depending on the weather. So, but the physical grounds of the farm, I feel like when they come, it seems like most people really enjoy it and like relax, and they see the animals. And I try to make it that everybody has an experience to be with the animals. I have some very extremely social flock members here on this farm. And it's not by accident. We spend a lot of time with the flock. So, because we love them, I love them. Like, that's why I'm farming. And so so I like to let that, I hope that other folk will have that same experience, that they'll go home and be like, oh my gosh, I sat with a sheep for an hour today, and all my troubles melted away. That is a wonderful thing for that to happen for them. And it will happen for them. They might have gotten soaked, or they might have been sitting in manure. They might have gotten mosquito bites or whatnot. And those are also important experiences. And I tell people ahead of time to wear boots or provide hand washing for them, but if you go home dirty, I think that's a good day at the farm. And so if we have a workshop coming up or this event in October, I'm going to focus on what we're going to be doing that's going to make it a rich experience, and then hope that I can shuffle things around in such a way that people are safe from a storm, for example, if that should happen. And so far, yeah. And I've got like a big front porch, and it's not real deep, but I have crammed everybody on the porch before, like 40 people when the rains, when the heavens opened up. Or in my house, I've done it a number of times. I forgot. That is my least favorite thing to happen. And it's not because I don't like to share my home. It's because the place is not picked up. So that's my way of saying, if I have to get everybody in my house for like emergency, rain headquarters or whatnot, there's no place to set anything. And I did have to do that this spring. I forgot. I had like this group from Williams College, which is not far from here, come to do an indigo day. And I guess there were 15 or 20 of them. And when they got here, it was pouring, and I couldn't bring them out back because we were doing indigo work, and I wanted to do it outside because indigo is pretty messy. But that we couldn't get out there because it was pouring. So we had to wait for I don't know, it seemed like a couple of hours that I had to work in the house with them. And I had not prepared my home. And so, there are eggs and jam and coffee and dishes piled up. There's just stuff all over. And the table I'm sitting at currently has 2 sewing machines and notes and bills and a camera. And there's no place for that kind of thing. Well, it's like, oh, shoot, this sucks, because I'm not set up for them. But if you they were so lovely. They were all college kids. And I said, hey, who wants tea? Who wants coffee? And we just enjoyed ourselves and talked and worked. And they didn't mind being on the floor and doing their we were doing shibori techniques. So we were, we needed space to spread out, and they did not mind working on the floor. Yeah.
Tell me.
But when I got to go back to that fall event that I have. I do get anxious about that. And I had a spring event too, where
what is the event?
Well, the fall event is the open farm, and it's on the Sunday of Indigenous Peoples Weekend. So I don't remember what date that is this year. It's usually the middle of October, and it's really nice. And I'll have a farmer's market with local market farmers, and different fiber farmers might come and have their things, and local artisans. And I always run around and take off this hat and put on that hat and do every half hour I change up the program. So if you're here from 10 to 5 or whenever, how long it runs, you will see me run around in that entire time to give different specific tours. And we'll have pumpkin decorating, and we have craft cocktails and chestnuts, and it's just really a fun day on the farm. And I usually do something interactive with the flocks and the folks, and have them move the flocks with me. And they love that. But there's usually, my fields are filled with cars. So what I was going to say regarding the weather and preparing for something like that, I mean, if the fields are wet, people are going to get stuck. So I try to put the word out ahead of time, to be careful, don't park here, and tape off the fields where they might be wet. Because really the least ideal thing is that everybody's stuck in my fields at the end of the day and can't go home. Why is that least ideal? Of course, you want to go home when you want to go home. But also, Doesn't Farmer Tam want you to go home at the end of the day? Yes. That's my biggest thing is like, come, everybody come. Make sure you can get out of the field when it's time to go. Because I'm not going to be as jolly at that point. Probably going to be cranky.
So we sort of touched on the natural dyeing. I think one of the things that's unusual, is that when there is dyed yarn in your shop, on your website, in your booth, not only have you dyed it, but you've dyed it with natural materials that you often grow in your garden. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about your natural dyeing practice?
Okay. I learned about natural dyeing when I was at a festival one year, and I was only selling my natural undyed yarn at that point. And I saw a booth where they had these beautiful sunny yellows and warm golds. And then I read the tag and saw that it had been dyed with marigolds. And of course, instantly I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I could dye my yarn with marigolds with natural dyes. That is the only way I will ever dye my yarn. So sort of taught myself in that next year about dyeing naturally. And then our yarn has only been naturally dyed since then. And I was like, I've always loved to garden. And I was a florist for a while when I was in my early 20s and went to florist school. And so I've always been a real flower fan. And I was like, well, this is wonderful. I can grow these, I can grow these dye stuffs in the purview of the animals that are going to be decorated with that dye stuff. And it just seemed like that was a good thing in the world, And also, there are a lot of things to forage in the vicinity of where I live. Like, it is very lush here in the summer. So I could forage and come up with color, natural color, and then nothing would be harmed in that way in the environment. And so, everything I do, it's in the backyard. When I do pour out a kettle of spent, exhausted water or whatnot, it goes into the ground where my well is, my literal well where my drinking water, all my water is right in the backyard where my kettles are. And so everything has to be safe or else I'd be drinking it. And so I use as much that I can grow or people give to me, like lovely folks save up their walnuts for me, black walnuts. And my daughter even came home from school this summer with bags of onion skins and avocado pits from being away for a year and saving them up because she's grown up with a mom who natural dyes. And so it's really lovely how things do come to me as well. And I have an organic farmer down the road who saves all her onion skins from her onions. So I get like giant bags of onion skins from her. But if I can't make the color with the pure dyed stuff, then I can make some sort of modified color. So my colorways are unique in that it's pretty specific to what I grow. I will buy extracts and I make them last a long time. And because they're so expensive, but rightfully so, because it requires a lot of labor generally for a natural dye stuff to be harvested and then preserved and all that. But I always am a little anxious about like the carbon footprint of it because it's got to be shipped, and whatever I buy online, it's got to be shipped to me from probably the other side of the country or, some other country coming into our country too. I guess Maiwa is somebody in, I think they're in Vancouver, and that's where I will go to them for like extracts because they're pretty careful about that they are harvested sustainably and it's fair trade. So I dye with like marigolds, and my indigo crop is crazy, and I didn't even seed it this year. So in Vermont, that's kind of a rare and wonderful thing that it reseeded from last year, and there's more of it. And so I make my own indigo vats. I literally have made enough indigo from my indigo that I would never have to grow indigo again.
Wow.
Yeah, because I've been growing it for a long time, and I make my own indigo paste and use that for all my indigo dyeing. But I love the color of fresh indigo in the summer. So that's why I keep growing it. It's so pretty. And I love using it as like an eco print as well, like haphazome, hammering it onto prepared fiber. And then things that grow well here in Vermont are like Hopi sunflowers, and the seeds make beautiful purples. I have a zillion dahlias, which can throw sort of a caramel tea color sometimes, depending on what they are. That's later on in the summer. Right now, I have weld growing really well, which gives me like a chartreuse yellow. So I have this great big bed of murasaki, which is it's like a madder root. And I also have madder for madder roots. And so you use the roots of it for like a purple, and madder for like the roots are for like corals, reds, pinks. And those are crops that take a few years that you plant and you wait to harvest the roots after 2 or 3 years. So most of my beds, there are more and more plants that I just can't think of presently, but most of my beds are raised beds, and my daughter and I build them, and we've got it down. We probably can't fit any more in the one footprint of a garden because we've maxed out there. But this year we started building another garden in like sort of a retired paddock because we didn't want the sheep to graze there. It was like an original pasture, and I wanted it to just be left alone. But instead, it was such a wet spring. So we have all these huge purple tubs from minerals that I feed the sheep. And we're like, why don't we, because it was so muddy and all, I used my tractor to get at my big manure pile to dig up old rotted compost manure and then fill in wherever I'm building a new bed, a raised bed, so to speak. But I couldn't get in there because I was only getting stuck all the time. So I was like, well, it's not going to happen this year the way we want to build this new bed for growing more dye stuffs. So we're just going to use these ugly purple tubs everywhere. And so we filled in these giant purple tubs, and I think we have about 20 of them. And they're all just overflowing with plants right now because so next year I'm hoping that I won't have the purple tubs, but it's sort of using what I've got. And yeah. And, it's really expensive to try to have an excavator come or to buy like, I don't know, topsoil or whatnot. And I never do that. I use the resources I have here. If I can use my tractor, I will. It's just not always accessible to get to my manure pile. I do have to say though, like I'm talking about the dye plant. Now I'm talking about gardening, the dye plants and the gardening. There's really no way to capture the cost of naturally dyeing our yarn. And it's not foolproof. There's this really lovely customer friend of the farm who's currently going back and forth with me. I'm like, I probably shouldn't talk about this because it's not like, doesn't sound good for my product, but like it's a thing that happens. And the madder root that I dyed the yarn with is crocking, and sometimes indigo does that as well. And that just means that like combined with the friction of her hands while she's knitting, it's coming off on her hands. So her hands are getting sort of pinkish. And so I'm sorry for that experience for her. And she said that it looks beautiful, but she's worried about if the color will run or stain something else. And I said, yeah, I understand that for sure. It will not run. It should not run. But your hands I know that it's bothering your hands, or it's bothering you that's on your hands. So if you want to, you can send it back to me and I will wash it with some white vinegar, or you could try it. So this has happened a couple of times just because there are certain dye stuffs that will do that or whatever, because it's not like an acid dye that, everything rinses away, like all the color comes out of the water into the yarn and then the water is clear and all that. It's not the same. There's generally exhaust color in the bath, in every dye bath. And there's generally some dye that will rinse away. But that kind of thing is really rare. It only happens once in a while. But when we troubleshoot through it, usually the customers are really happy with it. They love the yarn. They love the color. And so she was She said, let me rinse it first. I don't want to bother you. I guess she was 3/4 of the way done. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, most certainly do not frog it. Just finish it. And then when you soak it in a little bit of white vinegar, and then wash it again if you want with some whatever you use to block with wash and block. So natural dyeing is labor intensive on my part, and it's not foolproof. The thing is, I don't have any experience with acid dyeing my yarns at all. So I don't know, maybe acid dyes run too. I don't really have enough experience to compare them that way. I do know that is a thing that will happen on occasion, and I feel terrible when it does. But most people have been so awesome. My customers have been awesome about contacting me, and then we troubleshoot it together. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, Tammy, you're mentioning the one case in a while where the dye stuff didn't attach, and you've mentioned that sometimes the yarns change. But the thing is, when somebody goes to your booth from year to year, there are often, if not identical colors, because it's different batches, similar colors, and there are often similar yarns. So, there's this balance that you have between responding serendipitously to what's happening and having, something that's stable and repeatable. So I think that contrast is really interesting.
I think I might have more knowledge about what I'm doing than I'm letting on.
I think that modesty is often, a willingness to learn is a great quality.
Because it occurs to me that what you just said is true. And I feel like what I'm doing is so ingrained. What I've been talking about for an hour or whatever is that it's like, this is my vocation. And I have a lot of respect for the elements, the natural elements around me, but I also have a lot of experience. And I'm also always really excited to learn more. I wish I had an opportunity for more education. I crave to be a student, but I don't have time for it. So I'm like self-taught. But I think that, and I am a student, like I am a student of life, but it's just that it would be great if somebody else tell me what to do once in a while. I think that would be so lovely and leisurely. I would enjoy that. I would love to soak up being a student sometime. So I think, though, that I know intuitively now, like what colors I'm getting. And I do a lot of testing. I will always do a sample first when I've got a new kettle of color and see what it looks like on this yarn, on that yarn, on this fiber, on that fiber. Like I have this big iron kettle, and said iron kettle is from that same customer that is currently battling pink hands. She knew that I like to use iron as a modifier when I'm naturally dyeing. So I collect water in this giant iron kettle that she didn't need anymore. It's like a cauldron. And so if I were to, for example, use that water that collects in it, the rainwater, as a modifier, it's going to modify the color. It's going to make it sadder, grayer, darker, bluer, more olive, more brown, more whatever. That's what's going to happen when you add iron. I'm going to be very careful not to take anything that I am iron modifying it and putting it into the kettle I just made. So if I want to use, say I make a kettle of madder, and I have something that I had dyed in weld. So weld is like chartreuse, right? And it's going to make it bright, bright yellow on a white fiber. On a gray fiber, it's going to make sort of a light, like an olivey green. So if I have a white fiber, a white yarn that's been in the weld, bright yellow, and I think I want to make sort of an orangey color, move it into an orange, I might over dye it in the madder kettle because it's going to be redder, more coral or pinkish, and then I'm going to get more an orange, or I might get an apricot. It depends on how strong that madder root kettle is. But I want to make sure that there was no iron in the weld in the weld kettle, that there was no iron on the fiber. And literally, I would not want that fiber to have brushed up against anything that had rust on it or whatever. That in itself can change my matter kettle, like, adding in any trace modifiers that are as strong as, say, iron is, and not ruin the kettle, but change the whole kettle to another kettle. Like, I know all of these things, so I'm a little bit covetous about my dyeing arena. When people want to dye here, people who want to use my kettles, I have let them do that in the past, and they want to pay me something for a day's worth of dyeing, and I have done that. But I don't do it now because I need to watch them if they're doing it, because I don't want the kettles to get tainted. Because what it means is, if the kettle's not producing what I'm planning on, as far as if I decide, okay, this is my Thelma and Louise for 2025, and I'm in my head, these are the colorways that it's going to be, then I'm going to create these kettles. I use 100 quart kettles of color. It means that's a major resource, right? A 100 quart kettle of natural dye. I don't want anything to happen to it. So I'm covetous in that I don't want outsiders to mess with my kettles, because it means a lot of work for me and potentially altered or wasted resources.
Mm-hmm.
I would never throw out a kettle. But if I had a big kettle of madder root that for some reason turned into sort of a different color of any sort that to me wasn't primary enough, it would be a waste. Because it means I'm going to commit to dyeing a lot of things in there to use it up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what so then that will dictate what I'm doing. And that wasn't what I planned. I do try to plan my colorways.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a long way of saying how I plan colors and colorways and how persnickety I am. Yeah.
But
so when you see those same colors in my shop from year to year, or similar colors or similar yarns, I guess it is based on the experience and knowledge that I have too.
Mm-hmm. So it's, kind of planning ahead, but responding to what comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about your Valais Blacknose, if you don't mind, because they're so iconic. And I think, when a lot of people look at your farm, it's certainly they're kind of ambassadors for your farm. And I would love to hear more about them.
I would love talking about them. I'll tell you a little bit about the Valais Blacknose from when I started and to now. And I have some evolving opinions on raising them. It started where I was an enthusiast. I used to see them online, and I had a shearer once who shared a photo with me. This was quite a few years ago. They're out of Switzerland, the original Valais Blacknose sheep. And I was like, holy cow, is that cute? And so I just wanted to learn more. And then this shearer had brought me some fiber that somebody who'd gone to Switzerland gave to him. And so I was checking that out. And then in 2018, it became legal to import their semen into the United States. And so, like I said, I was an enthusiast. So when I saw that, I hopped online to see if I could buy some. I turned out there was an auction for some bred ewes. And so I did bid on them and won them. And that was the beginning of my Valais Blacknose journey here. We had a couple of Teeswater ewes that were bred, and they lambed in the spring of 2019. And I wept when I saw those Valais Blacknose lambs come out. I could not believe it was real. It was in my own barn here in Vermont. I was just I was so emotional because that was a dream come true in that moment. I couldn't believe that was happening. I mean, I guess I'll never ever forget that feeling. I never imagined that, it would happen. And it was a culmination of many things that made it happen. So it was really special, and raised them up and sold sold some and bred some. And now I don't know. I think I have about 30 Valais Blacknose sheep here.
Wow.
Quite a few of them are purebred now, and others are percentage. In 2020, it became legal to import embryos. And so for 2 years, I bought embryos and had them implanted like in artificially. Yeah, I had surrogate ewes, which some of them didn't make it. And so it was a real gamble. It was a real loss when they didn't make it. But some of them made it. And that's how I ended up with my purebred livestock here on the farm. So now I have all these Valais Blacknose sheep. They're beautiful. They're big. And I want to say, as I think you mentioned that they're sort of like ambassadors. And I call them lambassadors, which is so cheesy but perfect because they're like puppies. They just want to be in your pocket. Their behavior is quite different from many of the other sheep because they are very confident. They're all horned. They have great big horns. They're like helical horns. They spiral out away from their face, or they should. Sometimes on the rams, they grow they grow huge horns. And if they're too close to their face, that is not desirous. And you don't want to breed that. So I'm kind of careful about my breeding. I'm trying to choose the ones that are the most vigorous and have the best horn growth. The thing that I've learned is that they're very social. They grow a lot of wool. As I said, we're shearing them 3 times a year. Their lambs are less vigorous than my Shetlands, for example. It's a stark contrast because that is the other sheep that I breed on my farm are Shetlands. And so I'm working on that all of the time. So I mentioned before these tubs, these purple tubs, I buy these super expensive tubs of protein, high fat minerals specifically because of these Valais. Their requirements are intense. The sheep are native to the Alps, the Swiss Alps, and I would love to go there someday and see them in their native habitat. That means that, they're used to a cooler, more arid region, not this hot, humid weather that we've been getting here in the northeast of the United States, but where they get like in the southeast, in the mid-Atlantic states and all that. So they don't necessarily. You've got to really work to make them comfortable during the heat and humidity since they are native to the Alps. And then the other thing is when they lamb in the spring, I'm a bit of a helicopter mom, so nobody really goes unwatched around here as far as the Valais go. It's just such a big investment for me that I can't leave to chance something would go wrong. Their lambs aren't as vigorous as my Shetlands, whom I don't even have to throw an eye on. They're all good. And I haven't figured that all out yet, although I feel like part of it is it's like 2025, so it's only 6 years that we've been lambing here in the United States. And I never got to see in person, the sheep, where my sheep came from. So it could be a matter of, genetics that we ended up getting in the United States versus if I was in Switzerland, what I could put my hands on and breed up. So in spite of that, I've been picking the hardiest and most vigorous of the sheep that are here to breed up. I also, like I said, watch over them when they lamb. And I'm a really resource heavy farmer on these lambs in that first year of their life and even into their second year. So the rams I have right now that I've been using are yearlings. And, they were the rams I used for breeding last fall. I have a ton of Valais lambs this spring, thanks to those young rams. They were I guess they were like 5 months old at the time that I used them, but they were totally fine as rams. But I baby those rams because they're still growing. So instead of like many times a ram, like my Shetland ram, he's the same age. You would never have to like look at him until shearing in the fall. He's going to go out and forage and serve himself up all the nutrients he needs and take care of himself in such a way that he never needs a look at. But the Valais rams, they're still growing so much that I'm out there with hay, even though they're grazing, because they're a little spoiled. They like me to feed them. And I'm making sure they have their special mineral tubs. And I'm looking at their eyelids to make sure they're not anemic and that they don't have any parasite issues. And, I do that with them and I do that with the Shetlands. And it's not night and day, but they need a little more fussing. But so that for the first 2 years of these Valais lives, I'm a really fussy farmer. I dote over them. And then after that, it seems like all of my 1.5 to 2 year old and up Valais are set it and forget it. So because I have a whole bunch now that are, a few years old, because I've been doing it since 2019, and they're just as easy keepers as all my Shetlands. But in those first couple of years, I'm always like, oh, so-and-so is limping. Let me bring him in. I'm going to take a look at his foot, or let's take a look at this guy's eyelids because he's just lying down quite a bit. And, maybe it's nothing, but I'm a helicopter mom because I don't want it to be something. But then after that 1.5 to 2 year window, I'm completely satisfied that they are here for the long haul. They're really lovely animals. They're so big. I have some that are 275, 300 pounds. And that's a lot for me, right? When I have to trim hooves or whatnot, except that they're so in your pocket that, they don't even care what you do with them. They're like, sure, they think they're tiny, but they're not. Versus my Shetlands who are grow wings when I have to catch them to do something with. Oh, no, you're not getting me. I'm out of here. And they weigh 85 pounds. So the Valais have been really fulfilling because they've been a challenge for me. Their fiber has been interesting and different to work with. It's longer, it's lustrous, but it's coarser. I've been using it to get spun up and woven into blankets. And so we are finding that to be a really good product with the Valais fiber. Adding in a little Shetland to that wool, getting it put on cones for the weaver. And yeah, the blankets are simply beautiful. Instead of yarns for making, for knitters or crocheters to use, because they think that it's more coarse, so it's less user friendly in that way, but makes really good home goods. I am looking into getting it spun up as a bulky weight that I could then use for hooked rugs, because I would love to be able to offer that. I think it'd be a great rug hooking yarn.
So many different things. And we haven't even touched on, I know that you have an egg business, you have a pie business, you have little of this, that everywhere. and a shop in your house, on your property.
Yeah. And so it's kind of exciting because I didn't have a shop for many years. I thought I needed a space that was a shop, and I didn't have the resources, or didn't know if I had the time or the money for having a full-time shop or having storefront in town and all of that. So gave it up and turned my living room into a shop, and really pleased with that. It's nice, but I haven't been able to offer hours as much as I would like to. So people have been contacting me to come by appointment, which works really fine. And it's mostly because I am often doing stuff with the animals. I'm outside, or I'm in the garden, or I'm dying. And so it's hard to commit to full days of being in the shop. So it's great when people contact me. But in the workshops that I have coming up for the summer are on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, natural dyeing, soap making. I have a friend coming up from North Carolina who's teaching a primitive felting workshop. She does primitive style needle felting and wet felting projects. So we're going to be using the locks from the sheep. And I have a knitting designer, Gudrun Johnston, is coming in August, and Kate Solomon and Maureen Clark are coming from Green Mountain Spinnery in August. And we're going to be doing different types of workshops with with knitting, but also dyeing. And I have a natural dye journal making workshop. So I have lovely workshops coming up during the weekends of July and August. And I am inviting folks that are coming for those days to shop if they want to, but also like the public could come on those days because I am already committed to being,
Right.
here and with the shop.
We've covered a lot, and I know there's so much more to say, but what I was going to get to was how can people experience this for themselves? Now, we can all experience it online through your Instagram and your website, and we'll have links to that in the show notes. But if people want to get to know you and get to know your yarn, how can they do that?
Oh, thanks for asking that. I am usually at the festivals in the fall in New England. I would like to be at more of the festivals around the country that I read about, but it's not very practical. So you're going to see me at Rhinebeck in the fall, and you're going to see me in Boston in the spring, or not the spring, in the winter on February 8th next year, because I put on an event in Boston, which I forgot to talk about too. But yeah, you'll see me there. And I will talk about that again in a minute. And you'll see me here on the farm if you want to come to Open Farm on Indigenous Peoples Weekend on that Sunday, or if you want to come for any of my workshops this summer. And you can shop in person if you contact me if you're going to be in the area. I'm usually at Vogue Knitting in New York City in January. There's an event that happens in January and March in Wayland, Massachusetts. It's near Boston. And I'm usually at that event, a little fiber farm day at a place called Russell's Garden Center. It's really a nice gathering. And then, other fall events too, but I can't think of them all. A good way is to make an appointment with me or come see me at any of these events. Definitely come see me at Rhinebeck. I'll have sheep in the breed barn. I always do. And I also have a booth at Rhinebeck for selling the yarn. And a lot of times people don't know this, but if they order online, if they go to my online shop and they have questions, I am really happy to like Zoom with them or FaceTime with them to like concierge shop. I've done that a lot. And that seems to be really helpful for people if they have like a project in mind. Trying to think other ways to be, to shop. Oh, or to support the farm. I have a Patreon page. Wing and a Prayer Farm has a Patreon. And a lot of folks that like the Patreon like it because that's kind of like, I want to say it's like my farm diary. I do a lot of writing on Patreon. I do put pictures up and we have a Zoom, but mostly it's where I'm writing about things that are going on in my life and on the farm. People get to know the animals really well that are interested or get to know about what projects I'm working on my Patreon. And I'm definitely, like you said, on Instagram. And so the New England Farm and Fiber Festival is the event that I put on in Boston. And that is a thing that I have a booth at for sure. So you could come and shop. It's held on Tremont Street in downtown Boston at the Boston Center for the Arts Cyclorama, which is this really beautiful old historic building that it's all brick and sort of copper and wrought iron inside, and it's in the round. And it's so pretty in there, and it's all illuminated naturally because the dome above it is glass. So there's like probably 50 vendors this year. Last year were there 30-ish. This is my 8th year going to the New England Farm and Fiber Festival and putting it on. I think it's my 4th or 5th time putting it on. I can't remember. It's had a few iterations where it began and now where it is. It's a ticketed event because we have to observe the crowd, the crowd controls. And many of the vendors are farmers, are fiber farmers.
Wonderful.
And that's what's really special about it to me. And then there are other artists and artisans that are out of New England or other places as well. There was one venue that we used to host it at that was very specific that you could only have New England vendors. But now that we are hosting it and by we, I mean Wing and a Prayer Farm, is
Yeah.
hosting this event at the Cyclorama, I'd say send me your vendor application and I would love to probably host you or let you vend at this event. It's a 1-day thing. And we have like presentations and a guild that has like many spinners that share all day. And I don't know, it's just everybody just really enjoys it. It's a really feel good event to go to. Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like a wonderful thing to do in the middle of the winter to get a peek at the farm without having to go out in the snow.
Yeah, everybody is so happy to see each other. And it's definitely woolly weather, right?
Yeah.
And then because I think there are so farmers in the space, like there's a lot of socializing that we farmers never do except for when we see each other at those events. And so for us, it's like a potluck, it's like a real social thing for us farmers when we get to see each other. So it feels good for me for that reason. And I think other people as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll include links to all of these things so people can follow you for themselves.
Thank you, Anne. Bye-bye.
Thanks to our sponsors for supporting the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Long Thread Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again.